Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our 8th grade DC trip parent meeting. I'm Tim Hammond, Assistant Superintendent. We have a couple of our administrators at the middle school level that are going to present for us tonight. This same PowerPoint presentation, along with the information that you grabbed when you came in, will be on both middle school websites tomorrow morning. I will also say ahead of time that the payment, which we're going to be talking about here in a little bit, they're already in the fees, they're already set in there in case you want to start with any payments tomorrow. We're going to kick off this presentation with Mrs. Anna Pavko from Shore Middle School, assistant principal there, and Mrs. Erica Blackburn, who is the principal at Memorial. Once they're done with the presentation, I'll introduce Brian Nowak, who is from Nowak Tours, and he'll answer some questions and share a little bit more information with you. And then at the end, we'll have time for each middle school and for Mr. Nowak to answer any questions that you have. At this time, without any further ado, Mrs. Pavko.
All right, welcome, and thank you for coming out tonight. Our 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C. is always one of the favorite memories every year, so we're really excited to kind of get this process started and give you some preliminary information so that you can make plans for the trip this year. So as Mr. Hammond mentioned, we work with a company called Nowak Tours. Contact information is here and available. Again, this will be posted on our school websites so that if you have questions at any time, you know who you can reach out to as far as specific questions to the tour company. Just get this sort of logistic stuff out of the way to begin with. So the cost per student is $552, and that gets them space and a room for 4. There is also an additional $69 travel insurance option, which can get you a full refund should anything happen, illness, that type of thing. You have to purchase that insurance if you decide to do that within 14 days of making the initial deposit. So there's a flyer attached in this that will be sent out with that information, and I believe Brian's going to give us some more information at the end of this presentation on that as well. The first payment is due December 6th. That's a $100 deposit. That secures your intent and place to go to Washington, D.C. as we start making our plans. At that point, anybody who hasn't paid the $100 deposit, the fees for D.C. are removed off of your account at that point in time. And then the final payment is due by March 7th. You can make smaller installments along the way, but the final total of $552 needs to be paid by March 7th. That payment includes the following. So it gets you the transportation, 2 nights at a hotel, food for the trip. It pays for the private nighttime security that the tour company hires to help us keep control of 8th graders unsupervised in a hotel room for 2 nights. And it also gets us tickets to any attractions that have costs, as well as the taxes and gratuities that are needed for a trip like this. There is a few partial scholarships or full scholarships available on a needs-based rubric. So if that is something that your family might be interested in and you qualify for, and you would know if you qualify for that if you get free and or reduced lunches at the school. So if that is something that you do, you have to make sure your annual update is complete for this year, making sure that that is all set. And then there's an application process which is due by November 19th. We'll be sending out communication about that later this week too, so that you again know the process and how to get that started.
Thanks, Anna. Our students have the luxury of riding on Baron buses. These are very, very nice buses. There's Wi-Fi on the buses. It's pretty luxurious in comparison to a school bus. During those buses, we also play movies, so the kids are entertained on the travel down there. We do encourage kids not to eat a whole bunch of food on the buses, just because we've had occasions where kids are getting some motion sickness on the ride down there. So we encourage them not to overeat on the Baron buses. We will be staying in the DoubleTree Hotel. Again, there'll be 4 students per room. They are very, very nice hotels right outside of Washington, D.C. So then we'll travel into the city each morning for the activities. What the trip is going to look like. So day 1 is a pretty early day. Students are going to arrive to either Memorial or Shore starting at 5:45 to 6:15. When they arrive, We will have staff members kind of looking through their suitcases just to make sure that they're not bringing anything they shouldn't. Buses will depart at 6:30 a.m. from Shore or Memorial. Our first stop will be at Arlington National Cemetery. And then we will go ahead and have dinner at the Pentagon City Food Court. Students will have a voucher where they can go to different restaurants there at the food court and choose what they want to eat there. At 6 o'clock, we'll start seeing different monuments, and then at 8 o'clock, we will go and actually check into the hotel at that time for the first day. They get a lot of steps in, there's a lot of walking around, a lot of sightseeing. So day 2, our students are oftentimes very, very tired. We tell them to go to bed early that night, but sometimes they have fun hanging out with their friends. It is an early morning at 6:30. Breakfast is served at 7. And at 7:45, we are starting some of these tours and these sightseeing opportunities. We are going strong all day with lots of walking, lots of exploring of the nation's capital. At 7 o'clock, we have dinner and bowling, so they get to have some downtime, enjoying some bowling and dinner at the bowling alley. And then we return back to the hotel at 9:45. Day 3, we will be getting up again at 6 o'clock. We'll have breakfast at 6:30, and we will depart for Gettysburg at around 7:30. At 9 o'clock, we get there. We go to the visitor center. We have a tour of the battle fields, and we'll depart home around 12:15 that day. As we're riding home, they will get lunches on the way in order to ensure that we get home at a good time. And we typically are back around 7:15, 7:30. We will send messages as we're heading back just so parents are aware when we are expected to arrive either at Memorial or Shore.
So as mentioned, completing the annual update for the year is a requirement to be able to attend a trip like this. So if you have not yet done that for this year, I believe most families have, but if you haven't, going into Infinite Campus, you have to click on the More at the bottom, and then there's an option to click on the annual and household updates. If you're not new to the district, whatever information you've added previously automatically shows up, and you just have to click through and verify that everything is still current or make any necessary changes. This gives us updated contact information as well as the health information for your student so that we can ensure that they're safe while they're on a trip. We will communicate using our Loop communication system for this trip. So what that means is that if you're not familiar, that app can send out emails and text messages to families. If you don't have the app, you will get all Loop messages as text messages, so you don't necessarily need to do anything on the parent end. If your student has a cell phone, we do encourage them to bring their cell phones for communication and safety purposes on a trip like this, and they would want the Loop app downloaded. The only way they're going to be able to message their adult should they need something is through that Loop app. So them having the actual app, otherwise they're only going to be able to get announcements and communication that is not going to be sent back to their teacher or their chaperone. We also do require students to be in good behavior and attendance standing in order to attend a trip like this. So how we kind of qualify that, if your student gets 2 ASRs, 1 Saturday school or 1 in or out of school suspension, or is considered excessive or habitually truant, they will have to appeal in order to attend the Washington, D.C. trip. And that's a little bit of an intensive process for some of our 8th graders. They have to write a letter sort of explaining what has happened throughout the year that either caused their attendance issues or their behavior issues, and how that has now changed and been improved so that there should not be a concern while on the trip. This happens prior to spring break. And if they do not, and after they write that letter, they then meet with a panel of teachers and kind of talk through their letter and explain what has happened. So they really do have to be kind of accountable for the behavior and the attendance issues that might have arisen during the year. That being said, if a kid makes a mistake at the beginning of the year, we don't want them to, write off the whole year and not have the opportunity to go. So we do have this appeal process in place. Should the student's appeal be denied, you will get a full refund. So just keep that in mind. If your student or your child has hit any one of these markers, but still really wants to go on the trip, you can still pay that deposit in December. And then if for some reason their appeal is denied, you will get your deposit returned. All right, now we're just gonna run through some frequently asked questions that happen for this trip from year to year.
All right, big question that our students always have is how are roommates assigned? Our students get to pick their own roommates. So we will have a meeting. Students will select their own roommates. If a student has one friend they want, we will also pair up students that have a difficult time picking those 4 roommates. So we will help facilitate that process. As a parent, I would make sure that your child is choosing a good roommate, one that's going to allow them to get some sleep, not make poor decisions while they're in that room. So have those conversations with your student about choosing students that are going to help them make right and wise choices on the trip. All right, students should arrive to the building between 5:45 and no later than 6:15. We will not hold the buses for any student that has not made it to the building. So the buses will leave when they're expected to leave. We will not be holding buses. They will depart on time at 6:30. On departure day, students are going to go in the back of the building for sure. At Memorial, they're going to be dropped off by the big, large gym. They will come in, there'll be a line for boys, a line for girls. Our staff members will quickly look through their luggage just to make sure there's nothing that they shouldn't be taking. They will remain in the large gym until the buses arrive, and then we will dismiss them bus by bus to those Barron buses. Students should not bring an excessive amount of luggage, just enough for those 3 days, and it should be a variety of different clothes depending on what the weather is going to be like, and shoes that are comfortable. We do lots and lots of walking, so make sure that they bring appropriate footwear. I would also suggest that everything is marked, especially black luggage. There's going to be 400 different black suitcases, so make sure you have luggage tags or duct tape that says your child's name distinctly on that, because when they're trying to unload those buses, they want to find it quite quickly. Dress code does play a part in Washington, D.C., so they still need to be dressed appropriately, and as I said before, make sure that they have footwear that they are not going to end up with blisters at the end of the day. We walk, we walk, we walk, and walk some more. We will be going on all of those different tours, no matter if it's rain or shine. So there are some years that the weather does not work with us. We encourage students to bring ponchos or rain gear because there are times that we may need that.
Just a side note on that too, my own children are now just newly in the high school, and I remember them telling me it would be very uncool to bring a pocket poncho. However, if they do get wet, they are sitting in those wet clothes the entire day. We don't go back to the hotel until the very end of the day. So it might be worth telling your child, and we will remind them at school as well, that fashion might not be the top priority in a case such as that. So what other things should they bring? Again, make sure that you're checking the weather in the Washington, D.C. area as you get closer to that, so that they have jackets or sweatshirts if it's going to be cooler, or they have appropriate layers if it's going to get warmer throughout the day. We do recommend that they bring sunglasses, sunscreen, an umbrella or poncho, and then it's really important that they bring water and potentially snacks that are going to, keep them fulfilled in between the different things, just a small pack of crackers or something like that if we are not stopping for food and they happen to be hungry. When it comes to money, your child is permitted to bring money if they want to buy souvenirs or if they want to buy any extra food. When we do stop on the buses, we do not allow students to buy food at that time, just because with that many students, 200 students trying to get through a food line at a gas station would just take way too long. It would set our trip back quite a bit. So we don't allow them to purchase things there, but when we are in Washington, D.C., and there's the availability to buy, a snack or a souvenir, they are permitted to do that, and we do make intentional stops to make sure they have that opportunity. They don't have to bring extra money. All the food that they would need is covered throughout the trip, but again, if they want to bring something, then that's fine, but just remind them they're in a large city and they are going to be responsible for their own belongings, so they need to make sure they bring them in a safe and secure way. Snacks are permitted on the bus, as Ms. Blackburn shared. However, we don't want them eating excessively or drinking things that are going to make them feel sick while they're on the ride. There are restrooms on the bus, but they're really just for emergency purposes only. We'll be stopping every 2 hours, so students should have the opportunity to use the restroom as needed. Dairy products are not allowed. Energy drinks are not allowed. Anything overly caffeinated is probably going to cause problems. And we ask that you don't bring nuts, just for allergy purposes. They do need to be stored on a carry-on with them that they can bring onto the bus, and any drinks need to be in non-glass containers and sealable. What electronics? As mentioned, you can bring cell phones and you can bring any other small electronic devices, iPods, gaming devices, ebooks, that type of thing. Please do not bring your school-issued Chromebook. We don't want those left or lost in Washington, D.C. They're not going to need them for anything, so they can leave those back here at home. External chargers are a great idea. The buses do have charging ports. They don't always all work. A lot of them do, but not necessarily the one that happens to be at your child's seat. There's no guarantee. And then with how much they're out and about and walking around, it's a good idea that they have those external chargers if possible. We are not responsible for lost and stolen items, so the kids really do have to be responsible for the items that they bring. So if you don't want them to bring any of these things because you're not sure that it would come back, that's fine as well. Your student will remain on the same bus the entire trip. So they'll be put onto a bus based on their group that they choose for their roommates, along with others, and that will be their bus for the entirety of the trip. Changes would only occur in a very specific situation with some specific need that we would be addressing on a case-by-case basis. In the past, we used to do a lot of showing movies on the bus. Sometimes teachers still bring DVDs, but this day, most kids have what they want to watch right in front of them with their headphones, so that hasn't been as much of a need in the last few years. However, that may be something, if movies are provided by staff, they do follow the school guidelines about what is appropriate to be showing in a school setting. Yes, there is security at the hotel. So again, we mentioned that that's part of what is covered in the cost of the trip is that private security. They stake out the hallways, and if there's ever any issue, they alert the administrators on the trip. Students' rooms are also checked in each night by the staff members. We ensure that all of the children that are supposed to be in that room and none that are not supposed to be there are all accounted for. And then we do actually place a piece of tape over the outside of their room so that if for some reason that room is opened in the middle of the night, we would know that had happened. But again, the security guards are there as well. The few times I've been on the trip and a student came out because they were sick or something like that, the security guard is always right there and helps that child find what they need and get us some help in contacting their family as well. So that kind of covers that. So who supervises the trip? So we always have at least one administrator from each building on the trip, as well as several staff members who are the chaperones. Because of this out-of-state trip, we do not take parent chaperones with us. We know many of you love to come and join this experience with your children, but unfortunately with this trip, that's not something that we accommodate. We're usually able to staff this fully with our staff, and that is kind of a fun thing too for these 8th graders to get that small dose of freedom before they head off to the high school. If a student has an issue on the trip and has any behavior consequences, we typically obviously start with just conferencing with the student, helping redirect that behavior. It is possible that we might phone call home if there's repeated offenses from behaviors, but also if there's a situation where a student participates in something that's extremely unsafe or illegal, we would be asking the parent to come get the child at their own expense. So just really reiterate with your child that they need to be on their best behavior, school rules apply, and for all safety reasons, they're in a large city, they need to make sure that they're following the directions of the school and the adults that are in charge. If they do something that violates any of these things, it is possible that when they get back to school, there could be additional consequences as well. As Ms. Blackburn mentioned, we will use that loop system to communicate with families as we are nearing home. I'm sure your child will also be texting you. We're so far out, here's our ETA. We typically are back around 7:00 p.m. We come back to the school, unload the buses. You can pick up your luggage and any medications right then and there, as well as anything else that they've dropped off. They're usually pretty exhausted. They have had lunch on the way home, but they're usually pretty ready for dinner by the time we get back. If your child takes medication that they're going to need, you just need to fill out the medication forms that are linked here, and then make sure that you bring those medications to the school prior to the trip. So that information and those dates are all here. Anything over the counter no longer has to have a doctor's note, but you do have to sign off on it. So if that's something like any motion sickness medicine, Tylenol, Benadryl, anything like that does have to have that form completed, and then you would need to provide that medication to the school nurse. Students are not permitted to carry their own medication, whether prescribed or over the counter. And again, the link to that paperwork will be there, and more communication will be coming out throughout the year. You can pick up your medication the night of the trip. We'll have that set up and available, or you can come get it from the school in the next day or two. Everything will be packed up and ready to go. At pickup, you do not need to sign your child out. They're 8th graders. They're going to be able to find their rides home. If you want to carpool with a friend or a neighbor, that's totally fine too. Sometimes, especially at Shore, I think Memorial too, the traffic can get a little bit tight when we have a big trip like this, so carpooling isn't encouraged. But we also understand you haven't seen your kid for 2 days, so you might want to be there to welcome them home. As we mentioned, we do not take parent chaperones on our Washington, D.C. trip. We do appreciate that you are interested and are willing, and we obviously are very grateful that we do have willing parents that want to be involved, but this is not the type of trip that is conducive to parent chaperones, just with the nature of how everything works. If you have any other specific questions, as Mr. Hammond mentioned, we'll be in the corners here. Shore will meet on this side, Memorial on that side. We are going to let Mr. Nowak as well just give us a little bit more information about that insurance and some other things about the trip.
Thank you. Good evening. I just wanted to speak a little bit about the insurance, but before I start out with that, I just want to let people know, a lot of times people go, who's Nowak Tours? Where are they from? Who's taking my son and daughter to DC? Well, Nowak Tours, we are a local state-of-the-Ohio company. We are located right in Medina, Ohio. It will be celebrating 30 years next year. We work with many of the area districts. We've been honored to be working with Mentor since 2019, and as well as a lot of your districts in around the area. So we are a very student-focused company. On an average year, we do about 300 student tours, or about 20,000 students and adults. So we do take a lot of students to Washington, D.C., about 50% alone just to D.C. So just to let you know, we've been doing this for a long time, and we do work with, I said, a lot of area districts. Safety is always number one, service and quality as well. And when I mention that, I think in the one slide, there's information about, contact information. Please do not think twice if there's anything that you have that the school cannot answer to reach out to our office. I'm a parent, I'm a consumer too. I understand this is an important thing for you, maybe sending your son and daughter away for the first time. I assure you we take this job very seriously. So if there's ever anything that the school can't answer, reach out to our office. Food allergies in particular, we are very sensitive to that, and we'll always accommodate your needs. So we are there if we're needed for you, so please don't think twice. The insurance information, the insurance product that they're referencing tonight is through Travel Insured, and the product is called CFAR. CFAR stands for Cancel for Any Reason. What that means is you can cancel for any reason whatsoever up to 48 hours prior to your trip, and you're guaranteed 75% of your money back. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, what's the catch? What documentation do I need? Any reason whatsoever, no documentation needed as long as it's 48 hours prior to your trip. Son and daughter has a bad hair day. You just don't want to send your child. Maybe they get in trouble at school. Whatever it may be, you guaranteed that. Inside, all the way up to departure, illness or immediate family death is covered 100% all the way up to departure. Now, the insurance is certainly up to you. The one big thing about it, I know it's in the, tonight they talked about it in the PowerPoint, you do need to purchase that within 14 days of when you make your deposit to school. So if you do have to make a claim and you purchased your insurance, a month after you've made your deposit, they would deny that claim. So please make sure you're mindful of that. If you pay a deposit tonight, you have 14 days to buy that insurance. If you pay your deposit in December, you have 14 days from that time you pay that. So please make sure you're mindful of that. Those are not our rules. Those are Travel Insured's, and that's not something we can, get around. So that's the big piece. Again, I'll be here for any questions, and our contact information's on there. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Nowak. As mentioned, first of all, we went through this very quickly tonight. I understand that, but the good part is it's on the website tomorrow. So take time to look at it. Also, again, reminder, the payment fees, those will be in Infinite Campus if you want to start and look at those as well. To conclude tonight, I'm going to ask Mrs. Blackburn for Memorial to stand down here over to the side. Mr. Dwyer and Mrs. Pavko for Shore will be over to this side. Mr. Nowak will be back behind the table back here, and we thank you very much for coming out tonight. Good night.